What happens when you walk into a family home on Christmas Day and realize they erased the wrong man? By nightfall, the people who laughed had lost everything they thought made them untouchable. They never raised their voices at me again after I made one calm phone call. I stood on the porch holding a bag of gifts, watching frost collect on the new brass locks. They were installed recently. The screws still had that factory shine, and the wood around the strike plate looked pale where someone had drilled through the old paint. I rang the bell. Footsteps came quick and light. The door swung open, and Marla stood there in an apron that said Queen of the Kitchen, in cursive gold thread. Her smile was wide and practiced. "Uncle Keaton," she said, stepping aside. Come in, we were just setting the table." The house smelled like cinnamon and roasting turkey. Garland wrapped the banister. A massive tree filled the corner of the living room, lights blinking in rhythm. Everything looked perfect. Everything looked like a magazine spread. I stepped inside and set the bag down by the coat rack. "Where's Daniel?" I asked. Marla's smile didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. She glanced toward the kitchen. "Oh," she said lightly. "He's not here." I waited. Ethan appeared from the dining room, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He was wearing a sweater that cost more than most people's rent. His hair was gelled back, and his cologne filled the hallway. "Uncle Keaton," he said, grinning. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas," I said. "Where's your father?" Ethan laughed. Not a polite chuckle. A real laugh. The kind that comes from the chest. "He's not here," Ethan said. "We had to make some changes." I looked at him, then at Marla, then back at him. "What kind of changes?" Ethan tossed the towel onto the side table and leaned against the door frame like he owned the place, which I was beginning to understand. He believed he did. "Look," he said, "Dad was getting difficult. He wasn't taking care of himself. He wasn't taking care of the house. We had to step in." "Step in," I repeated. "Yeah," Marla said, crossing her arms. "We've been managing everything for months. The bills, the maintenance, the groceries. He couldn't handle it anymore?" I kept my face neutral. I've spent 30 years on the bench. I know how to listen without reacting. "So where is he now?" Ethan shrugged. "We found him a place, a little apartment across town. It's better for him, smaller, easier to manage." "Did he agree to this?" Marla's smile finally cracked. "He didn't really have a choice, Keaton. We're his family. We know what's best." I looked around the living room. New furniture, new curtains. The old photographs that used to hang on the wall were gone, replaced by abstract art in expensive frames. "When did this happen?" 2 weeks ago, Ethan said. "We handled it while he was out. Packed his stuff, moved him over. Clean and simple. You changed the locks." "Of course we changed the locks," Marla said. "It's our house now." I nodded slowly. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just stood there, holding my coat, looking at the two of them. "Does Mom know about this?" "She's upstairs," Ethan said. "She's fine with it." I doubted that, but I didn't say so. Marla gestured toward the dining room. "Come on, dinner's almost ready. You can see Ruth before we eat." I followed them into the kitchen. The counters were covered with serving dishes and wine bottles. A coffee mug sat near the sink, still half full, a ring of dried liquid around the rim. I recognized it. It was Daniel's, the one with the faded logo from a fishing trip we took 20 years ago. Nobody had bothered to wash it. I stood there for a moment, listening to Marla talk about the meal she'd prepared, watching Ethan pour himself a glass of wine like he was celebrating something. They weren't ashamed. They weren't even uncomfortable. They thought they'd won. I excused myself and walked upstairs to see my mother. Ruth was sitting in her room, staring out the window. She looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner. Her hands were folded in her lap, and she didn't turn when I knocked. "Mom?" I said quietly. She looked at me then. Her eyes were tired. "Keaton," she said, "I'm glad you came." I sat down in the chair beside her bed. "Where's Daniel?" She looked away. "They said it was for the best." "Do you believe that?" She didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was so soft I almost didn't hear it. "I don't know what to believe anymore." I stayed with her for a few minutes, then excused myself and went back downstairs. Ethan and Marla were setting the table. They moved around each other with the ease of people who had claimed their territory and intended to keep it. I didn't sit down. "I think I'm going to head out," I said. Marla looked up, surprised. "But we haven't even eaten yet." "I know," I said. "I just remembered something I need to take care of." Ethan shrugged. "Suit yourself." I picked up the bag of gifts and walked to the door. Neither of them followed me. As I stepped outside, I heard Marla laugh at something Ethan said. The sound carried through the open door, bright and careless. I got into my car and sat there for a moment, staring at the house. The new locks gleamed in the afternoon light. I started the engine and drove home. My apartment is quiet. I've lived here for 15 years, and I've never felt the need to fill it with noise. No television, no radio, just books and case files and the sound of the city filtering through the windows. I set the bag of gifts on the kitchen table and poured myself a glass of water. Then I sat down and thought about my brother. Daniel wasn't always inconvenient. There was a time when he was the center of everything, the one who fixed things, the one who showed up. When our father passed, Daniel handled the arrangements. When Mom needed surgery, Daniel took a week off work and stayed with her. When Ethan's first business venture collapsed, Daniel loaned him $20,000 without asking questions. He never asked for it back. I remembered the early holidays after Ethan and Marla got married. Daniel would host, he'd cook, he'd set up the guest rooms and make sure everyone had what they needed. He'd stay up late washing dishes while the rest of us sat in the living room, full and comfortable. Somewhere along the way, things shifted. It started small, jokes about his age, comments about his cooking, suggestions that maybe next year someone else should host, someone with a bigger house, a nicer setup. Marla started bringing her own food. She'd set it on the counter and mentioned casually that she wasn't sure if Daniel's oven worked properly. Ethan stopped calling unless he needed something. A signature, a reference, a favor. And Daniel kept showing up, kept helping, kept trying. I should have noticed sooner. I walked over to my desk and opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a folder labeled Family. I pulled it out and flipped through the documents. Property deed. Daniel's name, clear and legal. Medical records. Clean bill of health from 6 months ago. Financial statements. Modest but stable. There was nothing here that suggested he couldn't manage his own life. I thought about the new locks, the missing photographs, the way Marla had said our house like it was a fact. I picked up my phone and scrolled to Daniel's number. He answered on the third ring. "Keaton," he said. His voice sounded hollow. "Where are you?" There was a pause. "A little place on Elm Street, above a dry cleaner." "How are you doing?" Another pause. "I'm managing." "Did you agree to leave the house?" Silence. "Daniel," I said, "did you agree?" "They said it was temporary," he finally said. "Just until I got my feet under me. They said they'd take care of things." "Did you sign anything?" "I don't know. Maybe. Marla had some papers. She said it was just about the utilities." I closed my eyes. "Stay where you are," I said. "I'll call you back." I hung up and sat there for a long time, staring at the folder. Then I reached into the drawer again and pulled out a small recorder. It was old, the kind people used before everything went digital. Daniel had given it to me years ago, said I might need it someday. I pressed play. His voice filled the room. "Keaton, it's me. I just wanted to say thank you. For everything. I know I don't say it enough, but you've always been there. Even when things got hard. Even when I didn't deserve it. I'm grateful. I hope you know that." The message ended. I sat there in the silence, listening to the hum of the refrigerator in the next room. Daniel wasn't inconvenient. He was in the way. And the people who decided that had made a mistake. I opened my laptop and started searching through county records. It took me 20 minutes to find what I needed. The property transfer had been filed 3 weeks ago. Notarized, signed, supposedly legal, but I knew how to look deeper than most people. I pulled up the notary database and cross-referenced the seal number on the document. The license had expired 2 months before the signing date, which meant the entire transfer was void. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. Ethan and Marla thought they'd covered their bases. They thought a lawyer and some paperwork would be enough. They didn't count on someone actually checking. I saved the documents to a secure folder and shut down the laptop. Then I picked up my phone and made a series of calls. The first was to the county clerk's office. I left a message requesting an audit of the property transfer. The second was to a colleague who specialized in elder law. I outlined the situation and asked for a consultation. The third was to Daniel. "I need you to do something for me," I said when he answered. "What's that?" "Don't talk to Ethan or Marla. Don't answer their calls. Don't respond to anything they send you." "Why?" "Because I'm going to fix this," I said, "and I need you to trust me." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I trust you, Keaton." Good," I said. "I'll call you tomorrow." I hung up and sat in the darkness of my apartment, thinking about the next steps. This wasn't going to be quick. It wasn't going to be simple, but it was going to be thorough. And by the time I was done, Ethan and Marla would understand what it means to underestimate someone. I went back the next morning. Marla answered the door in yoga pants and a tank top. She looked surprised to see me. "Keaton," she said, "is everything okay?" "I wanted to talk to Ethan," I said. She hesitated, then stepped aside. "He's in the office." The office used to be Daniel's study, a small room off the main hallway with built-in shelves and a desk by the window. Now it looked like a showroom. Glass desk, ergonomic chair, framed motivational posters on the walls. Ethan was on his laptop, typing fast. He glanced up when I walked in. "Uncle Keaton," he said, "what brings you by?" I closed the door behind me. "I wanted to ask you about the house." He leaned back in his chair, hands behind his head. "What about it?" "Who holds the title?" He smiled. "I do. Well, Marla and I do. Joint ownership." "And Daniel?" He signed it over. "Clean transfer." "When?" 3 weeks ago. We had a lawyer handle it. Everything's legal." I nodded. "Can I see the paperwork?" His smile faded slightly. "Why?" "Just curious." He stared at me for a moment, then shrugged and pulled open a drawer. He slid a folder across the desk. I opened it and scanned the documents. Transfer of deed. Notarized. Signed. Daniel's signature was shaky. The letters didn't match his usual handwriting. "Where was this notarized?" I asked. "Someplace downtown. I don't remember the name." "And Daniel understood what he was signing?" "Of course he understood," Ethan said, irritation creeping into his voice. "He's not senile, Keaton. He knew it was time to let go." I closed the folder and handed it back. "And the move out." Ethan blinked. "What about it?" "How much notice did you give him?" "Plenty. 2 weeks." "Did you file anything with the county?" "We didn't need to. It was family business." I stood up. "I see." Ethan stood too, his face reddening. "Look, I know you and Dad are close, but you don't know what it's been like. He was falling apart. The house was falling apart. We had to do something. You had to take his house. We had to take responsibility," Marla said from the doorway. I hadn't heard her come in. She crossed her arms, her expression hard. "You don't live here, Keaton. You don't see what we see. We've been carrying this family for years." I looked at her, then at Ethan. "How much is the house worth?" I asked. Ethan's jaw tightened. "What kind of question is that?" "A simple one." "About 400,000, Marla said. "Not that it's any of your business." "And Daniel just gave it to you." "He transferred it legally," Ethan said. "There's a difference." I nodded slowly. "You're right. There is a difference." I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. "One more question," I said. "Did Daniel have his own lawyer present when he signed?" Ethan's face went blank. "What?" "His own legal representation, independent counsel." "He didn't need one," Marla said. "We weren't adversaries. We were helping him." "I see," I said again. I walked out of the office, through the living room, and out the front door. As I reached my car, I heard Ethan call after me. "Don't make this into something it's not, Keaton. We did what we had to do." I got in the car and drove away. 3 blocks later, I pulled into a parking garage and sat in the dim silence. I thought about the signature, the timeline, the missing independent counsel. I thought about the $400,000 they just acquired. And I thought about the clause most people forget. The one that says a transfer under duress or without proper representation or with fraudulent notarization isn't a transfer at all. I pulled out my phone and made a call. It rang twice before someone picked up. "County Records, this is Patricia." "Patricia, this is Judge Marin. I need to request a formal review of a property transfer." "What's the property address?" I gave her Daniel's address and the grounds for review. Questionable notarization, lack of independent counsel, and possible elder coercion. There was a pause. "That's serious, Judge." "I know," I said. "How quickly can we move on this?" "I can flag it today. Full review takes about 48 hours. "Do it," I said. "And Patricia?" "Yes?" "Keep this quiet. I don't want the current occupants to know it's being reviewed." "Understood, Judge." I hung up and sat there for a moment, watching people walk past the car. Normal people doing normal things, shopping, talking, living their lives. None of them knew what was about to happen. Neither did Ethan and Marla. Not yet. The courthouse was quiet the next morning. I arrived early before most of the staff and locked myself in my chambers. The county records audit came back faster than I expected. Patricia had flagged 3 major issues: First, the notary license had expired 63 days before the document was signed. The seal was invalid. Second, there was no record of independent legal counsel for Daniel. In cases involving property transfers over $200,000, especially with elderly parties, the lack of representation raised red flags. Third, the transfer had been completed in less than 24 hours from signing to filing. That kind of speed usually indicated either urgency or an attempt to bypass standard review procedures. Any one of these issues would be enough to challenge the transfer. All three together made it a certainty. I drafted a motion to vacate the property transfer. It was straightforward. Cite the statutes. Reference the expired notary license. Note the absence of independent counsel. Request immediate reversal. Then I drafted a second motion. This one was for emergency enforcement, a request for federal marshals to oversee the property return and ensure compliance. Most people don't understand how the legal system works. They think everything moves slowly. They think there are endless appeals and delays. But when you have standing, when you know the procedures, when you file the right motions with the right evidence at the right time, the system can move very quickly, especially when fraud is involved. I attached all the supporting documents, the expired notary records, the transfer timeline, Daniel's medical records showing he was competent and not in need of a caretaker. Then I filed both motions electronically. The system accepted them immediately. I set a hearing date for 3 days from now. Then I made another call. "Marshal Daniels," a voice answered. "It's Keaton Marin," I said. "I need to talk to you about an enforcement action." "What kind of action?" "Property recovery, fraudulent transfer. I've filed the motions, but I need federal oversight to make sure it's handled properly." "When?" 3 days, 4 o'clock. There was a pause. "That's fast, Keaton." "It needs to be," I said. "The people who took the property think they're safe. I want to make sure they understand they're not." "Send me the case file," he said. "I'll review it and get back to you." "Thanks," I said. I sent him everything and leaned back in my chair. Outside my window, the city was waking up. Cars moved through the streets. People walked to work. The world kept turning. And somewhere across town, Ethan and Marla were probably having coffee in the kitchen of a house that didn't belong to them. Not for much longer. I spent the rest of the morning preparing. I reviewed similar cases. I anticipated every possible argument Ethan's lawyer might make. I prepared responses. By noon, I had everything ready. My phone rang. It was Marshal Daniels. "I've reviewed your file," he said. "This is solid, Keaton. The notary issue alone is enough." "I know," I said. "And you're sure about this?" "This is family." "That's exactly why I'm sure," I said. He was quiet for a moment. "Okay. I'll have a team ready. We'll execute the enforcement order as soon as the judge signs off." "Thank you," I said. I hung up and stared at the ceiling. This was really happening. In 3 days, everything would change. I thought about calling Daniel, but I decided to wait. I didn't want to get his hopes up until I was certain. Instead, I locked up my chambers and drove to the bank. The branch manager was the same woman I'd worked with on the fraud case 2 years ago. She recognized me immediately. "Judge Marin," she said, standing up. "What can I do for you?" I sat down across from her. "I need to freeze an account." She pulled out a notepad. "Whose account?" "Ethan Marin and Marla Marin, joint account." She wrote down the names. "On what grounds?" "Fraudulent acquisition of assets. There's an active investigation." She looked up. "Do you have a court order?" I slid the document across the desk. She read it carefully, then nodded. "This is solid. I can process the freeze today." "How long will it take?" "About an hour. They'll receive notification by mail within 72 hours. "Perfect," I said. She disappeared into the back office. I sat there, watching other customers move through the lobby. An older man cashing a check. A young woman opening a savings account. Normal transactions. Normal lives. The manager returned with a confirmation slip. "It's done," she said. The account is frozen effective immediately. No withdrawals, no transfers, no access." "Thank you," I said. I left the bank and drove to Daniel's apartment. The staircase was narrow and poorly lit. The paint was peeling in long strips, and the handrail wobbled under my grip. I knocked on the door. Daniel answered after a moment. He looked thinner than the last time I'd seen him. His shirt was wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "Keaton," he said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you," I said. He stepped aside, and I walked into the small apartment. It was barely furnished. A couch, a folding table, a single chair. The kitchen was the size of a closet, and the bedroom door was half open, revealing an unmade bed and a pile of boxes. "I know it's not much," Daniel said quietly. You're not staying here, I said. He looked at me confused. What do you mean? I mean, you're going home. Keaton, I can't. Ethan made it very clear that I'm not welcome. Ethan doesn't have a say anymore, I said. I pulled out the court documents and handed them to him. He read slowly, his hands shaking. What is this? He asked. It's a motion to vacate the property transfer, I said. The notary seal was expired. The whole thing is fraudulent. The house is still legally yours. He stared at the papers. But Ethan said everything was legal. Ethan was wrong, I said. Or he knew and didn't care. Either way, it doesn't matter. The transfer is void. Daniel sat down on the couch, still holding the documents. When does this happen? He asked. 3 days, I said. There's a hearing and then enforcement. Federal marshals will oversee the return of the property. He looked up at me, and I saw something I hadn't seen in weeks. Hope. Are you sure about this? He asked. I'm sure, I said. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Thank you, Keaton. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, I said. Just be ready. In 3 days, you're going home. I left him sitting there, staring at the papers in his hands. As I walked back down the stairs, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about making sure Daniel knew he mattered, that he hadn't been erased, that someone was willing to fight for him. I got in my car and drove back to my apartment. 3 days. That's all it would take. The hearing was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon. I arrived at the courthouse early and waited in my chambers. At 1:30, my clerk knocked on the door. Judge Marin, she said. There's a lawyer here to see you. Says he represents Ethan Marin. Send him in, I said. A man in his 40s walked into the room. Expensive suit, leather briefcase, confidence that came from winning too many easy cases. Judge Marin, he said, extending his hand. I'm Gregory Lawson. I represent Ethan and Marla Marin. I didn't shake his hand. What can I do for you, Mr. Lawson? He set his briefcase on the chair and pulled out a folder. I've reviewed your motion to vacate the property transfer, he said, and I have to say, I think you're overreaching. Is that so? Yes. The transfer was completed legally. My clients followed all the proper procedures. Except for the expired notary seal, I said. He waved his hand dismissively. A technicality. The notary was licensed at the time of the initial consultation. The fact that the license expired before the final signing is irrelevant. It's not a technicality, I said. It's the law. An expired seal invalidates the document. We can argue that in court, he said, but I'm here to propose a settlement. I'm listening. He opened the folder and pulled out a document. My clients are willing to offer Daniel Marin a lifetime right of residence in the property. He can live there as long as he wants, with all expenses covered. In exchange, he withdraws his challenge to the transfer. I looked at the document without touching it. So they keep the house, and Daniel gets to be a tenant in his own home. It's a generous offer, Lawson said, considering the circumstances. What circumstances? Daniel's age, his declining ability to manage the property, the financial burden he was under. He wasn't under any financial burden, I said, and his ability to manage the property is just fine. Lawson smiled. That's not what my clients tell me. Your clients are lying, I said. The smile disappeared. That's a serious accusation, Judge. It's an accurate one, I said, and I'm not interested in your settlement. You should think carefully about this, Lawson said. If you push forward with this motion, it's going to get ugly. My clients are prepared to fight. So am I said. He stared at me for a moment, then picked up his briefcase. You're making a mistake, he said. We'll see, I said. He walked out, and I sat there for a moment, thinking about what he'd said. They were scared. That's why they'd sent a lawyer. That's why they'd offered a settlement. They knew the transfer was fraudulent, and they were trying to salvage what they could. But it was too late for that. At 2:00, I walked into the courtroom. Daniel was already there, sitting in the front row. He looked nervous, his hands folded in his lap. Ethan and Marla sat on the other side with their lawyer. Marla's face was tight with anger. Ethan looked like he was trying to appear calm, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. The judge entered, and we all stood. Judge Wilkins was in her 60s, sharp and no nonsense. I'd worked with her on several cases over the years. She didn't tolerate games. Be seated, she said. Lawson stood up. Your Honor, I'd like to request a continuance. My clients need more time to prepare their defense. Denied, Wilkins said. This is a straightforward review of a property transfer. You've had 3 days. That's sufficient. Lawson sat down, his jaw tight. Wilkins looked at me. Judge Marin, you filed a motion to vacate. Present your case. I stood up and outlined the facts: the expired notary seal, the lack of independent counsel, the suspicious timeline, the absence of any evidence that Daniel was incapable of managing his own affairs. Wilkins listened without interrupting. When I finished, she turned to Lawson. Response? Lawson stood. Your Honor, my clients acted in good faith. They were trying to help an aging parent who was struggling. The notary issue is a minor technicality that doesn't change the substance of the agreement. It's not a technicality, Wilkins said. It's a requirement. An expired seal invalidates the document. You know that, Mr. Lawson. We believe the court should look at the intent behind the transfer, not just the procedural details. The court looks at the law, Wilkins said, and the law is clear. She picked up the documents and reviewed them for a moment. Then she looked at Ethan and Marla. Did your father have his own lawyer when he signed this transfer? Ethan stood up. He didn't need one, Your Honor. We weren't trying to take advantage of him. That's not what I asked, Wilkins said. Did he have independent legal counsel? No, Ethan admitted. Did you explain to him that he was signing over a property worth $400,000? He knew what he was doing. Did you give him time to consider the decision? To consult with anyone outside the family? Ethan hesitated. We gave him the papers, and he signed them. Wilkins set down the documents and looked at him for a long moment. Mr. Marin, she said, you took a $400,000 asset from your father without giving him legal representation, without giving him time to consider, and using an invalid notary seal. Do you understand how that looks? Ethan's face went red. We were trying to help him. By taking his house, Wilkins said. She turned to me. Judge Marin, I'm granting your motion. The property transfer is vacated. The house reverts to Daniel Marin, effective immediately. Marla stood up. You can't do that. Sit down, Mrs. Marin, Wilkins said coldly. This is insane, Marla said. He can't take care of himself. Mrs. Marin, sit down, or I will hold you in contempt. Lawson grabbed Marla's arm and pulled her back into her seat. Wilkins signed the order and handed it to the clerk. The property is returned to Daniel Marin. The current occupants have 72 hours to vacate. If they refuse, federal marshals will enforce the order. She looked at Ethan and Marla. You're fortunate I'm not referring this for criminal investigation. If I see any evidence that you've damaged the property or removed anything that doesn't belong to you, I will. She stood up. We're adjourned. Everyone rose as she left the courtroom. Ethan turned to me, his face twisted with rage. You're going to regret this, he said. No, I said. You are. I walked over to Daniel, who was sitting in stunned silence. Let's go, I said. We walked out of the courthouse together. Behind us, I heard Marla shouting at Lawson, her voice shrill and panicked. Daniel stopped on the steps and looked at me. Is it really over? He asked. Not yet, I said. But it will be. The 72 hours passed slowly. I spent most of that time coordinating with Marshal Daniels and making sure every detail was handled correctly. Ethan and Marla made no move to vacate the property. I wasn't surprised. People like them don't accept defeat easily. They think if they ignore the court order long enough, it will go away. It won't. On the third day, at 3:30 in the afternoon, I drove to Daniel's apartment and picked him up. Are you ready? I asked. He nodded. I'm ready. We drove to the house in silence. At 3:50, a black SUV pulled up behind us. 2 federal marshals stepped out, both wearing suits and earpieces. Marshal Daniels was with them. He walked over to my window. Judge Marin, he said, we're ready when you are. Let's do it, I said. We walked up the driveway together. Daniel stayed close to me, his hands trembling slightly. I rang the doorbell. Marla answered. She was wearing the same expensive outfit she'd worn to the hearing. Her smile was gone. Keaton, she said. Her voice was cold. What do you want? We're here to enforce the court order, I said. She looked past me at the marshals. Her face went pale. You can't be serious. Step aside, ma'am, Marshal Daniels said. She didn't move. Ma'am, I'm asking you to step aside. This is my home, she said. No, I said. It's not. Marshal Daniels handed her a document. This is a federal enforcement order. You have 10 minutes to gather your personal belongings and vacate the property. 10 minutes? Her voice rose to a shriek. You're giving us 10 minutes? You've had 72 hours, I said. You chose not to use them. Ethan appeared behind her, his face dark with fury. You can't do this, he said. It's already done, I said. He pushed past Marla and stepped onto the porch. "This is harassment," he said. "I'm calling my lawyer." "Call whoever you want," Marshall Daniels said. "But you're leaving this property in 10 minutes. Ethan pulled out his phone and dialed. I could hear him shouting at someone, probably Lawson. Marla started crying, loud, dramatic sobs that echoed across the street. "This is cruel," she said. "You're throwing us out on the street." "You did the same thing to my brother," I said. "The difference is he didn't deserve it." She glared at me through her tears. "You're going to pay for this, Keaton. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are." "Go ahead," I said. Marshall Daniels gestured to his team. "Start the clock." The marshals moved into the house. One of them began documenting everything with a camera. The others stood in the hallway, making sure nothing was removed that didn't belong to Ethan and Marla. Ethan was still on the phone, his voice getting louder and more desperate. Marla ran upstairs. I could hear drawers slamming, things being thrown around. Daniel stood on the lawn, watching it all with a blank expression. "You okay?" I asked him. "I don't know," he said. "This doesn't feel real." "It's real," I said. At the 8-minute mark, Marla came back downstairs with 2 suitcases. Her makeup was smeared and her hair was disheveled. Ethan hung up the phone and looked at me. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes," I said. "It is." He grabbed one of the suitcases and walked toward the car. Marla followed him, still sobbing. They loaded the suitcases into the trunk and got in. Ethan started the engine and sat there for a moment, staring at the house. Then he drove away. I watched the car disappear down the street. Marshall Daniels walked over to me. "The locksmith is on his way. Should be here in about 15 minutes. "Thank you," I said. He nodded. "We'll stay until the locks are changed and everything is secure." I turned to Daniel. "Let's go inside." We walked through the front door together. The house looked different already. The new furniture was still there, but it felt empty somehow, like a stage set waiting for the real owners to return. Daniel walked slowly through the rooms, running his hand along the walls, looking at everything with a mixture of sadness and relief. "They changed so much?" he said. "You can change it back," I said. He stopped in the living room and looked at the bare walls where his photographs used to hang. "I don't even know where they put my things," he said. "We'll find them," I said. The locksmith arrived and got to work. It took him 20 minutes to change all the locks. When he was done, he handed Daniel a new set of keys. "All yours, sir," he said. Daniel held the keys in his palm, staring at them like he couldn't believe they were real. The marshals finished their documentation and prepared to leave. Marshal Daniels shook my hand. "We'll file the report tonight. If they try to come back, call us immediately." "I will," I said. They left, and it was just me and Daniel, standing in the house that had always been his. "I don't know what to say," Daniel said. "You don't have to say anything," I said. He walked to the window and looked out at the street. "Do you think they'll try to come back?" he asked. "Maybe," I said. "But they can't. The court order is final." He nodded slowly. "Thank you, Keaton, for everything." "You're my brother," I said. "I wasn't going to let them do this to you." I stayed with him until the sun went down. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. When it was time to leave, I picked up my coat and headed for the door. Daniel stopped me. "Keaton," he said, "I know this cost you something, standing up to them like this." "It cost me nothing," I said. "They're the ones who paid." I walked out into the night and got into my car. Behind me, the house stood quiet and solid, its windows glowing with warm light. And for the first time in weeks, it felt like it belonged to the right person. The next morning, I woke to 23 missed calls. Ethan, Marla, their lawyer, a few numbers I didn't recognize. I didn't return any of them. Instead, I made coffee and sat by the window, watching the city wake up. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Ethan, we need to talk. This is insane." I deleted it. Another message. "You can't just destroy our lives like this." Deleted. Marla, "You're a monster. I hope you're happy." Deleted. I set the phone down and finished my coffee. At 9 o'clock, I drove to the courthouse. The clerk's office was open, and Patricia waved me over. "Judge Marin," she said. "I processed the enforcement order yesterday. Everything went through smoothly." "Any appeals filed?" I asked. She checked her computer. "Nothing yet, but they have 30 days. "Let me know if anything comes in," I said. "Will do." I walked to my chambers and settled in for the day. Around noon, my mother called. I answered. "Keaton," she said. Her voice was shaky. "I need to talk to you." "What's wrong, Mom?" "Ethan came to see me this morning. He's very upset." "I'm sure he is," I said. He says you threw him out of his house. It wasn't his house, Mom. It was Daniel's. She was quiet for a moment. He says you humiliated him, that you had federal agents escort him out like a criminal. Federal marshals, I said, and they were there to enforce a court order. Why did it have to be like this? She asked. Why couldn't you all just work it out? Because Ethan didn't want to work it out, I said. He wanted to take Daniel's house and pretend it was legal. But Daniel signed the papers, she said. With an expired notary seal, I said, and without a lawyer, and without understanding what he was signing. That's not legal, Mom. That's fraud. She sighed. I just wish things didn't have to be so difficult. I do too, I said. But Ethan made his choice. Now he has to live with it. We hung up, and I sat there for a while, staring at the phone. Family is supposed to be simple. You're supposed to take care of each other, support each other, but sometimes family becomes the thing that hurts you most. That afternoon, I got a call from Marshall Daniels. Keaton, he said, I thought you should know. Ethan Marin tried to enter the property this morning. What happened? The locksmith called us. Ethan was trying to break in through the back door. We showed up and reminded him of the restraining order. There's a restraining order? There is now, Daniel said. Judge Wilkins signed it this morning. Ethan and Marla are prohibited from coming within 500 feet of the property. Good, I said. He wasn't happy about it, Daniel said. Started making threats. We had to warn him that if he violated the order, we'd arrest him. Do you think he'll try again? Hard to say, Daniel said. But we're keeping an eye on the property. If he shows up, we'll know. Thank you, I said. I hung up and leaned back in my chair. Ethan was desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. I just needed to wait for him to make his. Later that evening, my phone rang again, a number I didn't recognize. I answered. Judge Marin? A woman's voice. Professional. Cold. Speaking. This is Jennifer Hastings from Channel 7 News. I'm calling about a story involving your nephew, Ethan Marin, and allegations of elder fraud. I sat up straighter. Where did you hear about this? We received an anonymous tip. Court records show a property transfer was vacated due to fraudulent documentation. The property belonged to your brother, Daniel Marin. Is that correct? I have no comment, I said. Our sources indicate federal marshals were involved in the enforcement. That's unusual for a family dispute, isn't it? No comment, I repeated. Mr. Marin, the public has a right to know when someone uses fraudulent documents to steal property from an elderly family member. Would you like to provide your perspective? I thought about it for a moment. Then I said, the court records are public. Everything you need to know is there. So you're confirming the fraud occurred? I'm confirming the court vacated the transfer based on invalid documentation. That's a matter of public record. And federal enforcement was necessary? It was deemed appropriate by the court, I said. Now, if you'll excuse me. I hung up before she could ask another question. 2 hours later, my phone rang again. This time it was Ethan. What did you do? He screamed. The news is calling us. They're asking about fraud charges. I didn't do anything, I said calmly. Court records are public. Anyone can access them. You tipped them off. I didn't, but even if I had, it wouldn't matter. Everything in those records is true. You're destroying us, he shouted. Marla's employer called her. They're putting her on administrative leave pending an investigation. That's not my problem, I said. You did this on purpose. You wanted to ruin us. No, Ethan, you ruined yourselves. I just made sure the truth came out. He was breathing hard on the other end of the line. I swear to God, Keaton, if you don't fix this... You'll what? I interrupted. Sue me? You already tried to steal from your own father. What are you going to do now? Silence. Leave Daniel alone, I said. Leave me alone, and maybe eventually people will forget what you did. I hung up. 3 days later, the news story ran. Channel 7 did a full segment on elder fraud, using Ethan and Marla's case as the primary example. They didn't mention names on air, but they didn't need to. Anyone who knew the family would recognize the details. My mother called, crying. How could you let this happen? She asked. I didn't let anything happen, Mom. This was already happening. The news just reported it. But everyone knows now. Everyone is talking about it. Then maybe Ethan should have thought about that before he committed fraud, I said. She hung up on me. I sat in my apartment that night, listening to the silence. I thought about the news coverage, the public humiliation, the way Ethan and Marla's carefully constructed lives were crumbling. I should have felt guilty. I didn't. They'd tried to erase Daniel, to make him disappear, to take everything he'd built and claim it as their own. Now the world knew what they'd done, and there was no coming back from that. 4 days after the news story aired, I got a call from Gregory Lawson. "Judge Marin," he said. His voice was tight. "I'd like to discuss a possible resolution." "I'm listening," I said. "My clients are willing to accept the court's decision regarding the property. In exchange, they'd like Daniel to consider signing a non-disclosure agreement." "A non-disclosure agreement?" I repeated. "Yes. They're concerned about ongoing media attention. They'd like assurance that neither Daniel nor anyone acting on his behalf will discuss this matter publicly." I laughed. Actually laughed. "You're joking." "I'm quite serious," Lawson said. "My clients are willing to pay a substantial sum for Daniel's cooperation." "How substantial?" $75,000. I leaned back in my chair. "Let me make sure I understand. Your clients want to pay Daniel to be quiet about the fact that they committed fraud against him." "That's not how I would characterize it." "But that's what it is," I said. "They want to buy his silence." "They want to move forward with their lives," Lawson said. "This publicity is destroying them." "Good," I said. Lawson was quiet for a moment. "That's your response?" "That's my response," I said. "They tried to destroy Daniel. Now they're experiencing consequences. I'm not going to help them avoid those consequences. This isn't about revenge, Judge Marin." "You're right," I said. "It's about justice, and justice means people understanding what your clients did." "The court has already ruled," Lawson said. "The property is returned. What more do you want?" "I want them to understand that actions have consequences," I said. "I want everyone who knows them to understand what kind of people they are, and I want them to spend the rest of their lives knowing they can't escape what they did." "That's vindictive." "That's accurate," I said. "Tell your clients the answer is no. Daniel won't sign anything, and neither will I." I hung up. That evening, I visited Daniel. He was in the living room, watching television. He muted it when I walked in. "Keaton," he said, "I saw the news story." "I heard," I said. "How do you feel about it?" He thought for a moment. "Strange. Part of me feels embarrassed that everyone knows what happened, but another part feels vindicated." "Vindicated?" "Yeah, like people finally see the truth. For years, Ethan and Marla made me feel like I was the problem, like I was the one who couldn't handle things. Now everyone knows it was them." I sat down across from him. "Their lawyer called me today. They want you to sign a non-disclosure agreement." "What does that mean?" "It means they want to pay you to stop talking about what they did." Daniel's face hardened. "How much?" $75,000. He shook his head. "I don't want their money." "I know," I said. "I already told them no." "Good," Daniel said. He was quiet for a moment, then added, "Is it wrong that I'm glad this is happening to them?" "No," I said. "It's human." I keep thinking about all the times they made me feel worthless. All the comments about my age, my abilities, my house. They were planning this for months, weren't they? "Probably longer," I said. Daniel looked at me. "Do you think they ever loved me, or was I just a problem they needed to solve?" I didn't have an answer to that. "I think they convinced themselves they were doing the right thing," I said finally. "People are good at that, justifying their actions, making themselves the hero of their own story." "But they weren't heroes," Daniel said. "No," I said. "They weren't." We sat in silence for a while. Then Daniel said, "Thank you, Keaton, not just for getting the house back, but for making sure people know the truth." "You're welcome," I said. 2 days later, the bank called again. "Judge Marin," the branch manager said. "I thought you should know. Ethan and Marla Marin tried to open a new account this morning." "At your bank?" "Yes." We denied the application. "On what grounds?" "Internal fraud alert," she said. "Their names are flagged in our system due to the ongoing investigation into the property transfer. We can't do business with them." "What did they say when you told them?" Ethan became very agitated, started demanding to speak to corporate. Marla just sat there looking defeated. "Thank you for letting me know," I said. "Of course," she said. "And Judge? Other banks in the network have been notified as well. They're going to have a hard time finding anyone willing to work with them." I hung up and sat there, thinking about what that meant. No bank account, no credit, no financial stability. They were being systematically shut out of the system. It was more than I'd planned for, more than I'd expected, but it was exactly what they deserved. That afternoon, I received an email from the county clerk's office. It was a formal notice. Ethan and Marla had filed for bankruptcy. I read through the documents. They listed debts of over $200,000, legal fees, back rent on the motel where they were staying, credit card balances they could no longer pay. The house had been their security. Without it, everything else had collapsed. I forwarded the email to Marshall Daniels with a simple note. Thought you should see this. He called me an hour later. They're imploding, he said. Yes, I said. You know this is going to get worse for them, right? Bankruptcy doesn't erase what they did. The fraud investigation is still ongoing. The county prosecutor is reviewing the case. I know, I said. Do you want them prosecuted? I thought about it. What I want is for Daniel to be left alone. If prosecution achieves that, then yes. I'll make sure the prosecutor has everything she needs, Daniel said. Thank you, I said. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how far this had gone. I'd started with a simple goal: return the house to Daniel. Now I was watching Ethan and Marla's entire lives disintegrate. Part of me wondered if I'd gone too far. But then I thought about Daniel in that apartment above the dry cleaner, thrown out of his own home, treated like garbage by his own son, and I knew I hadn't gone far enough. 3 weeks after the news story broke, I was working late in my chambers when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Judge Marin? A woman's voice, older, tired. Speaking. This is Helen Garrett. I'm Marla Marin's mother. I sat up straighter. Mrs. Garrett, what can I do for you? I'm calling to ask you to stop. Stop what? Whatever you're doing to my daughter and her husband, they're falling apart. Marla calls me every night crying. Ethan can't find work. They're living in a motel room. You've destroyed them. I didn't destroy them, Mrs. Garrett. They destroyed themselves when they committed fraud. They were trying to help Daniel, she said. He couldn't take care of himself. That's not true, I said. Daniel was perfectly capable of managing his own life. Your daughter and son-in-law wanted his house, so they took it. They made a mistake, she said, but this punishment is too severe. Can't you show them some mercy? Did they show Daniel mercy when they changed the locks and threw him out? She was quiet. Mrs. Garrett, I said, I understand you want to protect your daughter, but what happened here wasn't a mistake. It was calculated. They planned it. They executed it, and they did it without any regard for Daniel's well-being. So, you're just going to watch them suffer? I'm going to make sure they face the consequences of their actions, I said. That's not the same thing as making them suffer. That's justice. She hung up without another word. I sat there for a long time after that call, thinking about mercy. I'd spent 30 years on the bench. I'd seen every kind of case, every kind of crime, every kind of excuse. And I'd learned that mercy without accountability is just enabling. Ethan and Marla didn't need mercy. They needed to understand that what they did was wrong. The next morning, I received a certified letter. It was from the county prosecutor's office. Dear Judge Marin, this letter is to inform you that our office has completed its review of the property transfer case involving Daniel Marin, Ethan Marin, and Marla Marin. Based on the evidence provided, including the expired notary seal, lack of independent counsel, and suspicious timeline, we have determined that sufficient grounds exist to pursue criminal charges. Ethan Marin and Marla Marin will be charged with 1 count of elder fraud and 1 count of forgery. A grand jury hearing is scheduled for next month. If you or Daniel Marin wish to provide victim impact statements, please contact our office. Sincerely, Assistant County Prosecutor Brielle Donnelly. I read the letter 3 times. Criminal charges. This was real now. This wasn't just a civil matter. This wasn't just about returning property. This was about holding them accountable in the eyes of the law. I called Daniel immediately. Keaton, he said when he answered. Is everything okay? I just received a letter from the prosecutor's office, I said. They're filing criminal charges against Ethan and Marla. Silence. Daniel. I heard you, he said quietly. What kind of charges? Elder fraud and forgery. He didn't respond for a long moment. Then he said, What happens now? There will be a grand jury hearing. If they indict, there will be a trial. The prosecutor wants to know if you want to provide a victim impact statement. Do I have to? No, I said. But it might help. It would give you a chance to explain how this affected you. I don't know if I can do that, Daniel said. Stand up in court and talk about how my own son tried to steal from me. You don't have to decide now, I said. Think about it. We hung up, and I sat there in my chambers, staring at the letter. This was the moment, the point of no return. Once these charges were filed, there was no going back. Ethan and Marla would have criminal records. They would be marked as fraudsters for the rest of their lives. I thought about my mother, about how this would hurt her, about how the family would never be the same. Then I thought about Daniel, sitting in that tiny apartment, believing he'd lost everything, and I knew I was making the right choice. 2 days later, I received another call, this time from Ethan. "Keaton," he said. His voice was hoarse, broken. "Please, you have to stop this." "I can't stop it," I said. "The prosecutor's office is independent." "You could talk to them. You could tell them this has gone far enough." "Why would I do that?" "Because we're family," he said. "Because Mom is falling apart watching this happen. Because Daniel got his house back. Isn't that enough?" "No," I said. "It's not." "What do you want from us?" he shouted. "What more can we possibly give?" "I want you to understand what you did," I said. "I want you to accept responsibility. I want you to stop making excuses." "I made a mistake," he screamed. "I'm sorry. What else do you want me to say?" "Nothing," I said. "There's nothing you can say that will change this." "You're enjoying this," he said, his voice dropping to something cold and hateful. "You're enjoying watching us fall apart." "No," I said. "I'm not, but I'm not stopping it either." I hung up. That evening, I drove to my mother's house. She was sitting in the living room when I arrived. She didn't stand up when I walked in. "Mom," I said. "I know why you're here," she said. "You want me to understand, to accept what you've done." "I want you to know the truth," I said. "The truth is you've destroyed this family," she said. "Ethan and Marla are being charged with crimes. Daniel won't talk to anyone. And you? You've become someone I don't recognize." "I haven't changed, Mom. I've always been this person. You just never had to see it before." She looked at me with eyes full of sadness. "I thought you would find a way to fix this, to bring everyone together, but all you've done is tear us apart." "They tore us apart when they threw Daniel out," I said. "I'm just making sure there are consequences." "At what cost?" she asked. "At whatever cost it takes," I said. I left her house and didn't look back. The next week, the grand jury convened. I wasn't allowed in the room, but the prosecutor called me afterward. "They indicted," she said. "Both counts, for both defendants." "What happens now?" "Arraignment in 2 weeks. Trial date will be set after that. This is going to move forward, Judge Marin." "Good," I said. "Are you sure you want this?" she asked. "Once we start the trial process, there's no stopping it, even if Daniel changes his mind." "I'm sure," I said. She hung up, and I sat there in the growing darkness of my chambers. Outside, the city was settling into evening. Lights coming on in windows, people heading home from work. Normal lives continuing. And somewhere, Ethan and Marla were receiving the news that they'd been indicted, that their lives as they knew them were over. I should have felt something, satisfaction, relief, victory, but all I felt was the cold certainty that this was justice, and justice doesn't care about feelings. The arraignment was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. I arrived at the courthouse early and took a seat in the back of the gallery. Daniel was already there, sitting in the front row. He looked smaller somehow, older. At 9 o'clock, the bailiff called the court to order. Ethan and Marla walked in with their lawyer. Ethan's suit looked cheap and ill-fitting. Marla's dress was wrinkled. They both looked like they hadn't slept in days. The judge read the charges. Elder fraud, forgery. "How do the defendants plead?" the judge asked. Their lawyer stood. "Not guilty, Your Honor." The judge set a trial date for 6 weeks out and addressed bail conditions. Ethan and Marla were released on their own recognizance with the condition that they maintain no contact with Daniel. As they walked out of the courtroom, Ethan saw me. He stopped. For a moment, I thought he might say something, might make one last plea. But he just stared at me with eyes full of hate and walked away. Marla followed him, her shoulders shaking. Daniel approached me in the hallway. "That's it?" he asked. "That's all that happens today?" "That's the arraignment," I said. "The real proceedings start at trial." "I don't know if I can do this," Daniel said. "Sit in a courtroom and watch my son be prosecuted." "You don't have to be there," I said. "The prosecutor can handle it." "But you'll be there." "Yes," I said. "I'll be there." He nodded slowly. "Okay, then I'll be there too." The 6 weeks passed slowly. During that time, I received multiple calls from Ethan's lawyer trying to negotiate a plea deal. I refused to discuss it. The prosecutor kept me updated. The evidence was overwhelming. The expired notary seal, the timeline, Daniel's testimony about not understanding what he was signing. It was an open and shut case. 2 days before the trial, Ethan's lawyer called me one last time. "Judge Marin," he said, "my clients are willing to plead guilty to a reduced charge in exchange for probation." "No," I said. "You're not even going to consider it?" "There's nothing to consider," I said. They committed fraud. They should face the full consequences. This is about revenge, he said, not justice. This is about making sure they never do this to anyone else, I said. He hung up without another word. The trial began on a cold morning in February. The courtroom was packed. News cameras waited outside. The story had become bigger than I'd anticipated. The prosecutor presented her case methodically. The notary records, the property transfer documents, bank statements showing Ethan and Marla's financial situation before and after the transfer. Then she called Daniel to the stand. He walked up slowly, his hand shaking as he placed it on the Bible. "Mr. Marin," the prosecutor said, "can you tell the court what happened on the day you signed the property transfer?" Daniel's voice was quiet but steady. "Ethan and Marla came to the house. They said they needed me to sign some papers about the utilities. I trusted them. I didn't read them carefully. I just signed." "Did you understand you were transferring ownership of your house?" "No," Daniel said. "Not until 2 weeks later when they told me I had to leave." "And how did that make you feel?" Daniel's voice broke. "Like I didn't matter. Like I was just an inconvenience they needed to get rid of." The courtroom was silent. The defense attorney cross-examined, trying to suggest Daniel had understood what he was signing, that he'd agreed to the transfer, but Daniel held firm. "I would never have given away my house," he said. "That house was my life." The trial lasted 3 days. On the final day, the jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on both counts. Ethan's face went white. Marla started crying. The judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks out. I walked out of the courtroom and stood on the steps, watching the news vans pack up their equipment. Daniel came out a few minutes later. "It's over," he said. "Not yet," I said. "Sentencing is in 2 weeks." "What do you think they'll get?" "Probably probation," I said. "Maybe some community service. First offense, family situation, they'll get some leniency." "That doesn't seem like enough," Daniel said. "The conviction is what matters," I said. "They'll have criminal records. That follows you forever." He nodded. "I should feel happy, but I just feel tired." "That's normal," I said. We stood there in silence for a moment. Then Daniel said, "Thank you, Keaton, for everything." 2 weeks later, we returned for sentencing. The judge gave Ethan and Marla each 5 years probation, 500 hours of community service, and ordered them to pay restitution to Daniel for all expenses related to his forced relocation. Ethan stood when the judge finished and turned to look at me one last time. His eyes were empty, defeated. He'd lost everything. His house, his reputation, his future, and he knew exactly who was responsible. I stared back at him without blinking. Then the bailiff led them away. Daniel and I walked out of the courthouse together into the bright afternoon. "What now?" he asked. "Now you go home," I said, "and you live your life." "What about you?" "I go back to work," I said. "This is finished." We shook hands, and he walked toward his car. I stood on the courthouse steps, watching the city move around me. People passing by. Cars honking. Life continuing. Somewhere across town, Ethan and Marla were beginning their probation, beginning the long process of understanding what they'd lost. And I felt nothing but the cold satisfaction of a job completed. They'd tried to erase the wrong man, and I'd made sure they paid for it.